conversations and stories you simply won't hear from the mainstream media. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
Common sense for the American people, broadcasting on location today, Saginaw, Michigan. I'm here for coverage of the President's State of the Union speech tonight. Here with my CNN colleagues, including Van Jones. Van and I will be part of CNN's live coverage of the speech this evening, and also on CNN's live streaming app. We're going to be talking to voters here in Saginaw about what they hear from the president and get their reaction. And the president is due to speak tonight around 9 o'clock. Conservatives are keeping their eye on what the president's priorities will be for the next year or so. Will he look to cut more red tape? Will he try to do health care reform? One of the groups always working on issues like this, important things at the federal and state level. Americans for Prosperity, they're our friends here at the show. And joining us now, Brent Gardner is the Chief Government Affairs Officer and Senior Vice President at Americans for Prosperity, AFP, we call them. Brent, never a dull moment. We have the State of the Union coming up tonight. What's your expectation and hopes for President Trump's remarks?
Big night, Scott. Yeah, I'm hopeful that we're going to hear from a president who's excited for the progress that we've made and who's ready to lay out a bold agenda for where he knows we need to go from here. And I think he's got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I expect the president, Brent, to go heavy on a couple of vectors on the economy. One would be to talk about the mess that he inherited, frankly. And the other is to talk about, in a macro way, first, the good markers that have come out over the last year, getting things back on track, but also then in a micro way, highlight the stories of people who have directly benefited from his policies. If he does that, is that what you're hoping the kind of communication strategy will be tonight for the White House?
Yeah, I think so, Scott. I think ultimately, even though we have made good progress, no one can dig out of the policies the last 4 years and really decades of growing government in just 1 year. And for today, millions of Americans still find the American dream harder to reach than they did a generation ago. So I think he's going to talk about energy abundance. I think he's going to talk about lowering energy costs. I think he's going to talk about more affordable housing, lowering health care costs and putting patients first, not insurers, lowering grocery prices, and then, ultimately finding ways to ensure that we restrict both the size and scope of government. I think he's made some really great strides there, and it's the kind of thing we know we're going to need to continue to do if we're going to turn things around here in this country.
Yeah, the federal government, smallest size since 1966, which, Brent, every Republican I ever worked for in my entire career said they were going to shrink government, and Trump's the first person to do it. I hope he makes a deal out of that. We're also expecting the president tonight to talk about America's 250th anniversary. Now, Americans for Prosperity, you all have a lot going on around America 250. Tell us a little bit about what AFP has going in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a project we call One Small Step. And as I mentioned, for many Americans, the American dream feels out of reach. Taking one small step is an opportunity to reclaim that. It's rooting in today's conversations and founding principles while elevating today's voices to show that freedom still works. Highlighting places where the founders helped get us here and the people who along the way have helped build this country into what it is and make the American dream something worthy of actually searching for. So we've got stuff across the country that we're going to be doing. We're encouraging Americans to take that one small step for themselves and to share their story to help shape the next chapter of the American dream. And we've got a great website that people can go to on that, Scott, www.a250toolkit.com. So we're going to be holding events across the country. We're going to be highlighting people who are helping to live their American dream and hoping to see that American dream live even stronger as we move into the future.
Now, Brent, the Democrat response is going to be given by the new governor of Virginia, Abigail Spanberger. She's off to a rather inauspicious start, in my opinion. Someone who was positioned as a moderate has really signed a lot of radical legislation and pushed a lot of radical ideas in Virginia. How do you see the split screen between President Trump and Spanberger tonight?
Well, I'm trying to recognize her because if I remember correctly, Governor Spanberger ran as a moderate who ultimately wasn't going to be a big departure for folks in Virginia. That's how she convinced them to get on board. And as a Virginia native, I certainly can tell you that the legislation we've seen coming through that she apparently supports is the kind of thing of nightmares for most Americans. And they're trying to figure out what happened. So I'll be interested to see how she reacts to the policies being pursued by the president. And ultimately, I'm wondering how much more disconnected she can get and where that party is actually going to be by the time we get to November.
Yeah, it's an interesting juxtaposition when they're governing versus when they're campaigning. I think a lot of people in Virginia are quite surprised based on what they had been told versus the results they're getting. Brent Gardner from Americans for Prosperity, thanks for joining us on the show. We'll be watching the speech, and we'll look forward to your reaction afterwards. We're going to take a break.